All right, ready to dive deep into AbaData's triage tool today. You sent over a ton of info on it. And let me tell you, predicting pipeline corrosion,
Yeah.
especially the kind hiding inside the pipes, that's a tough nut to crack.
It is. And what's really fascinating here is how triage goes beyond those usual methods, you know? It actually looks at the behavior of nearby wells. And that's something most tools completely miss. It's like having this whole team of analysts constantly watching for these hidden threats that could, impact your pipeline.
Yeah, so it's not just about what's happening inside the pipe itself, but also about the surrounding environment, right? So what kind of data does triage use to do this?
Well, it pulls data from the Alberta Energy Regulator, which gives it this massive, huge amount of information to work with. It can see things like, CO2 levels, water flow. By analyzing past failures and looking at these often overlooked factors, triage can predict where future problems are most likely to pop up. And that means you can shift from reacting to problems to actually preventing them.
And that's where it gets really interesting for those of you in the field, right?
Yeah.
Because triage doesn't just give you a bunch of numbers. It tells you what to do about them.
Absolutely. Triage integrates right into AbaData, so your teams can see risk assessments right there on their map, alongside these easy-to-understand reports they can share with their chemical teams.
So it's right there at their fingertips. But it's not just a one-way street.
Right. Your field teams can also report back, and this feedback makes the data even more accurate over time. So it's this constantly evolving system.
This all sounds pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But let's bring it back to you, the listener. Why should you care about all this? Well, the bottom line is corrosion leads to leaks. And leaks mean environmental damage, safety hazards, and huge financial hits. Triage is designed to help you avoid all of that.
Exactly. It's about empowering your teams to make smarter decisions. With the kind of information Triage provides, they can optimize their efforts to prevent corrosion and keep your pipelines running safely and smoothly.
Now let's get into the details. Can you walk us through how Triage assesses those internal corrosion risks? What are the key factors it looks at?
One of the most important things Triage considers is the presence of CO2 and the state of the water film inside the pipeline. Stagnant water can create these areas where the pipe becomes more vulnerable to corrosion.
It's almost like those stagnant areas become like breeding grounds for corrosion to take hold.
Exactly. And that's where Triage's data analysis really shines. Remember, it's tapping into the Alberta Energy Regulator's data, and this allows it to assess how severely fluids are flowing from those nearby wells, which can have a direct impact on how corrosive the environment inside your pipeline becomes. And it goes even further. Triage also considers the pipeline's proximity to past failures. It's essentially learning from past mistakes, right, to predict where future problems might occur.
That's what I call being proactive. Okay, so we talked about how triage determines the likelihood of corrosion. But does it also factor in the potential consequences of those risks?
It does. Triage considers the potential impact if corrosion does lead to a failure. This includes environmental impact, safety hazards to personnel, and the financial fallout from, downtime and repairs.
So it's not just about pointing out the risks.
Yeah.
But also understanding the full scope of what could happen.
Exactly. This gives operators a more complete picture to work with. So once Triage has analyzed all this data and assessed the risks, it provides specific guidance on how to mitigate those risks. And importantly, this guidance is tailored to each pipeline's unique situation. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Triage will provide a hierarchy of options, starting with the most effective and practical solutions. For instance, if a pipeline can be cleaned regularly with a pig, Triage will recommend that as a top priority. And remember, Triage is a collaborative tool. Your field operations teams can use the data validation forms within AbaData to provide feedback and make the data even more accurate over time.
It's a continuous learning loop, constantly refining and improving. Now that's what I call smart pipeline management.
Exactly. By integrating this kind of intelligence into your operations, you're not just mitigating risk, you're improving efficiency, reducing costs, and ultimately ensuring the long-term integrity of your pipeline network.
We've covered a lot of ground already, but before we move on, I want to get your take on the bigger picture. What are some key takeaways about triage that you think our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, first and foremost, triage is all about taking a data-driven approach to managing corrosion, right? It's using powerful analytics and modeling to predict problems before they happen, which allows you to be proactive rather than reactive. Triage is looking at factors that are often overlooked, like the behavior of those nearby wells. It's about seeing the bigger picture and understanding how everything is connected.
It's a more holistic approach, right? Not just looking at the pipeline in isolation, but considering the entire ecosystem around it.
Right. And lastly, It's designed to give your teams in the field, both operations and chemical, the information they need to take action. It's not just about the data itself, but about translating that data into practical solutions.
It's about bridging the gap between information and action. Now let's get even more specific and focus on how triage benefits those folks working in the field. Can you walk us through how field operations teams can actually use this tool in their day-to-day work?
Sure. So triage is all about making life easier for those boots on the ground folks. First off, it's integrated right into AbaData, the platform your field teams are probably already using. So all the information they need is right there. No need to jump between different systems. And within AbaData, triage presents these detailed risk assessments visually right on the map. So your teams can quickly see which pipelines are most at risk, where those potential trouble spots are.
It's like having a heat map of corrosion risks,
Yeah.
showing them where they need to focus their attention.
And beyond that visual map display, triage also generates these comprehensive reports that go into more detail about each pipeline's risk profile. These reports are designed to be easy to understand, and these reports can be easily shared with chemical teams, which makes it easier for everyone to get on the same page, right, when it comes to figuring out how to tackle those risks. It's about offering solutions tailored to each pipeline's unique situation. Triage provides this prioritized list of actions, starting with the most effective and practical solutions. If a pipeline can be cleaned regularly with a pig, that'll be at the top of the list.
Right, back to our trusty pig.
Exactly. For pipelines where pigging isn't feasible, triage might recommend adjusting the chemical environment inside the pipeline. This could involve using specific types of corrosion inhibitors to create a protective barrier between the pipe and those corrosive fluids.
So it's about giving them clear, actionable steps to take to mitigate those risks.
Right. And remember, triage is constantly being updated and refined based on feedback from the field. So it's this dynamic tool that evolves along with your operation.
So it's a two-way street with information flowing back and forth between the field and the analytical engine.
Exactly. This feedback loop helps ensure that triage is always getting smarter, more effective over time.
And we've talked a lot about how triage helps field operations teams, but I'm curious to hear more about how it benefits chemical teams as well.
Yeah, chemical teams play a crucial role in preventing and mitigating corrosion. And triage gives them a really powerful tool to enhance their work.
So how does triage specifically support the work of chemical teams?
Well, first and foremost, triage provides this much deeper understanding of the corrosion risks within a pipeline network, It analyzes all sorts of factors, from the chemical composition of the fluids being transported to the potential for contamination from nearby wells. This gives chemical teams a much more complete picture than they would get from traditional assessment methods. With this deeper understanding, chemical teams can develop more targeted and effective mitigation strategies. They can figure out exactly what types of corrosion inhibitors will work best in different parts of the pipeline, and they can fine-tune their chemical injection programs to optimize performance and cut costs.
It's about moving from a one-size-fits-all approach to a more tailored and precise strategy.
Right. And triage also acts as kind of like an early warning system. By monitoring things like changes in fluid chemistry or the presence of, corrosive byproducts, it can alert chemical teams to potential issues before they turn into major problems. This early warning system allows chemical teams to step in and address those issues proactively, preventing those big, costly repairs and the headaches that come with them.
So it's about shifting from a reactive to a proactive management approach.
Precisely. And by providing chemical teams with this level of support, triage empowers them to be true partners in the fight against corrosion. Both teams can access triage's insights and reports within AbaData, making sure everyone is on the same page and working with the same information. This helps promote transparency and accountability, right? Everyone knows the risks, plan, and how things are progressing.
It's about breaking down those silos and creating a more integrated approach to pipeline management.
Right. And triage also has tools that support joint decision-making. For example, field operations teams can use those data validation forms we talked about earlier to give feedback on triage's assessments, which then helps the chemical teams refine their strategies. Ultimately, triage helps foster a shared understanding of just how important corrosion prevention and mitigation really is. It's about creating a culture of shared responsibility for pipeline integrity across the entire organization,
That's a great point. It'd be helpful to hear about some real-world examples
Mhm.
of how triage has been used to actually prevent and mitigate corrosion.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got this great example from a pipeline operator here in Alberta. They were having these persistent corrosion issues in a particular section of their pipeline network. And, traditional inspection methods weren't really helping them pinpoint the cause. They decided to give triage a try, and it really opened their eyes, and the results were impressive. The corrosion rates in that section of the pipeline dropped significantly, and they were able to avoid a major pipeline failure, which could have been incredibly costly and disruptive.
That's a fantastic example. It really shows how valuable this kind of proactive approach can be.
Yeah.
It's not just about reacting to problems,
Right.
but anticipating them and preventing them before they even happen.
Exactly. And that's what triage is all about. It's giving operators the tools they need to move from a reactive to a proactive mindset when it comes to managing corrosion.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from how triage works to the real-world benefits it offers. It's been a really insightful deep dive.
I agree. It's clear that triage is a really powerful tool that has the potential to revolutionize how we manage pipeline corrosion.
So if our listeners are interested in learning more about triage, where can they go to find out more information?
The best place to start is AbaData's website. They have a ton of resources, case studies, information about how triage works. You can also reach out to their team directly, and they're always happy to answer any questions you might have.
Perfect. We'll be sure to include a link to their website in the show notes. And as always, we encourage you to keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the topics that matter to you.
And remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about the technology shaping our world, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into AbaData's triage tool. Until next time.